Hey, what's up guys? Hello, so Football Talk here. Finally back here on YouTube. After a few weeks where I just put out stuff on my page, hellosofootballtalk.com. Hope you all checked out my full season predictions, 3 takeaways that I had from every week 1 game, and a couple other things I put out there. Today we will look ahead to week 3 of the season, which is something that I thought about making a weekly thing, going through every game on the slate, breaking down the matchup, and giving you my score prediction. Last year I did weekly recaps, so let me know which one of the two you would prefer, either here or on my social media channels, which you can find linked down below in the description. And if you want me to do these every single week, we have 16 games on the slate, timestamps for all of them are linked down below in the description, so let's get right into it with Thursday Night Football. The 2-0 Carolina Panthers traveling to Houston to take on the Texans. Panthers are favored by 7.5, the over-under set at 43.5. And for the Texans, like I said last week, there are still 53 professionals on that roster for Houston. Even if we all projected them to be the worst team in the league, the young talent may be limited, but they will fight. They beat out on the Jaguars and then played a tight game through 3 quarters versus the Browns, who are all perceived to be one of the top contenders in the AFC. Brandon Cooks is making big play after big play for this group. They have a million running backs out there, it seems like, and Tyrod Taylor has played well for this group. He might miss a month now, however, so we'll get extended time of rookie Davis Mills. Defensively, they certainly have the issues, but there's a few individual players who can make plays for them, like a Justin Reed at the safety position, Zach Cunningham at linebacker. They invested plenty of draft picks on the defensive line, so they'll look for some of those guys to emerge. Carolina, on the other hand, I thought would go 8-9, and I felt bad almost for not giving them another win. I really like what Matt Rule and company are building down there. They could have easily had a more convincing win against the Jets, but then showed that they're for real with a 19-point victory over the Saints, who had just demolished the Packers in week 1. I put out a video on this Carolina defense on my social media handles, so check that out later. But just to put some numbers on them, they've held opponents to a league lows with 2.7 yards per carry, just a quarter of the third downs against them to be converted, and just 12.5% of defensive drives have ended up in points. Offensively, Sam Darnold offers more athleticism and big playability than Teddy Bridgewater brought last year, as well as he's been playing for Denver. And with Christian McCaffrey back, they have somebody to consistently move the chains, creating mismatches against linebackers out of the backfield for cheap yardage and stuff like that, while also having playmakers in DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. He's not been really involved, but they can definitely put up some points. In this matchup, even though the Texans' offensive line has been solid, I think they'll face the biggest test from a group with Brian Burns and company coming to town. That is certainly concerning when you have Mills on the center for Houston, whose fundamentals really broke down under pressure when I watched his tape at Stanford. Brandon Cooks may school top 10 pick J.C. Horn at corner a couple of times, but other than that, I don't believe the Texans have the weapons to scare the opponents out of man coverage and rolling that extra safety into the box. On the other side of the ball, the Panthers just present more firepower, going up against a rough group of corners, to where if they get over 20 points, I don't think the Texans can win this game. So because of that, I'm saying the Panthers are up by 6 heading into the 4th quarter and seal the deal with another field goal, 26-17 for Carolina. And that brings us right to the Sunday slate, starting things off with the Indianapolis Colts at 0-2 going to Tennessee to take on the Titans, who are at 1-1. Tennessee is favored by 5 points and the over-under is set at 48. In this AFC South battle, these two teams may only combine for 1 win, and it took the Titans overcoming a 2-touchdown deficit at Seattle last week to avoid this being a matchup between 0-2 teams. But from what we know, this should certainly be the 2 teams that the division comes down to once again, I believe. We knew coming into the season there would be a tough start for Indy, as they've opened the season with 2 teams that won double-digit games last season in the Seahawks and Rams. Jonathan Taylor has looked good in his 2nd season, but the offensive line has had unexpected issues protecting Carson Wentz, who might be banged up right now because of it, somehow spraining both his ankles on the same play. I still have no idea how that is possible. Defensively, they have a great play at all 3 levels with DeForest Buckner, Darius Leonard and Julian Blackmon, but their corners have been rough. I questioned the outside guys, but now that nickel Kenny Moore got lit up for over 100 yards per Cooper Kupp last week as well. Something they have been good at as a team is avoiding flags, as they have been penalized for just 41 yards so far through 2 games, the fewest in the entire league. For the Titans, I still have no idea how they pull out that game at Seattle, where they came back from being down 14 in the 4th quarter, but they stayed patient with feeding the beast in Derrick Henry and he carried them to another overtime win, with Julio Jones responding after being called up by his head coach a week before that with a big game. And that was definitely a touchdown for him. No idea what the refs smoked and how they actually changed that call. The tackles have been a major concern for Tennessee, getting torn up by Chandler Jones and showing issues again versus the Hawks. But I still have confidence in that offense in general. The defense has been awful, however, as their 68 points allowed is tied for the third most in the league, with a completely overhauled secondary and just a couple of guys like Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry actually making plays for them. That's a chance for the unit to come together as the season goes along, and this may not be the matchup they should be super worried about with that young defense. With the Carson Wentz uncertainty, their protection not nearly being as good as we expected, and issues in coverage, I can't really trust Indy right now. Michael Pittman should have another good day against the Tennessee secondary, and defensively, they have the guys up front to make Derrick Henry less effective at least, not allow him to get the momentum rumbling downhill. But if the Titans can just keep them honest, with Julio and AJ Brown bound to have a big game it feels like, those guys streaking open off-play action is something that's playing in my head right now. Give me the Titans 30-23, and even though I like the potential that Jacob Eason showed as a quarterback prospect out of Washington, if he's starting, I could see the line creeping up and the Titans being a touchdown favorite when this thing closes. Moving on to the Atlanta Falcons at the New York Giants, and this actually is a battle of 0-2 teams, and two that have been very disappointing so far. Looking at the Giants being favored by 3 points here, over-under set at 48. For the Falcons, I among many others thought that the Falcons should use their 4th overall draft pick on one of those quarterbacks like a Justin Fields, because they don't have a championship team right now, but at the same time, they aren't bad enough to pick this high again. Well, right now it looks like they might pick even higher. They have given up a league-high 80 points and were held to just 6 themselves in the season opener against Philly, for example. The defense has been absolute garbage, which was expected to some degree with no proven commodities outside of Grady Jarrett and those 2 linebackers in the middle, but they also haven't shown the ability to really hang with high-powered offenses themselves. I talked about Matt Ryan's arm a little bit last week and how he limits this offense with the lack of a vertical component, while converted wide receiver Cordell Patterson has looked like the best ball carrier so far, leading to just 4.6 yards per play overall. On the Giants side, I was really high on this defense heading into the year and still believe that they could be pretty good, but they've given up points on a league-high 58% of the defensive drives, and they're tied for the league with 7 first downs surrendered by a penalty. That's the side of the ball that I've been disappointed about. The offense has been okay, I would say. Daniel Jones had 1 bad fumble in the season opener, but other than that, he's been pretty good, throwing dimes to Darius Slayton on go routes, ripping off big plays as a runner, and putting up nearly 30 points against Washington. We saw a glimpse of what can happen when Saquon Barkley gets going. Just give him a crease, but they'll have to keep spreading the ball around through the air to open up room for him, with remaining issues on the offensive line. I think we have one team that will finish around 500, or maybe slightly below that, and one that might pick in the top 3, and the better of the two is playing at home. I believe the Giants have the pieces in the secondary to match up with those Atlanta Falcons receivers, and if Daniel Jones continues to play well, I don't see how the Falcons can cover what the G-Men put out there, while New York has a bunch of big guys up front to make Atlanta one-dimensional, and Saquon should have his best game yet. Not a lot of people would tune into this game outside of those markets, and for good reason, but I still believe the Giants are a better team top to bottom, so give them the home team here, 27-23, and with how bad this Atlanta defense has been, maybe the over deserves a look here, or at least the Giants team total over. Let's see how that trends as we get to game day. Next up, however, is a doozy with the LA Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs. Both teams standing at 1-1. And it's funny how these things can go sometimes, where we have the teams that were projected to finish first and second in the AFC West, and that's still how I look at this division. But the other two teams are the ones who are still undefeated in the Broncos and Raiders. In this game, Kansas City is favored by 5.5, over under 55.5 points. Looking at the Chargers first here, I've been very impressed by Justin Herbert and his transition from a sensational rookie to a guy who already plays like a veteran and can stay patient in his approach. Thanks to that, they've converted a league-high 61.3% of their third down attempts, and the protection has been really solid, outside of the backup right tackle getting exposed last week when Micah Parsons made his transition back to defensive end. First-round pick Rashawn Slater in particular has played like an all-pro almost already. Defensively, they've been kind of bend but don't break, ultimately holding their opponents to 16 and 20 points respectively. The two major issues for this team so far: the Bucs are the only team even within 20 yards of the 96.3 lost via penalty per game, and they are also second to last, converting only 30% of their red zone drives into touchdowns. For the Chiefs, I'll quote a line here from Kyle Brandt of Good Morning Football: "The Russian is bleeding." Talking about Ivan Drago and Rocky Balboa, of course, where here we have the kings of the AFC showing some signs that they can be beat, as the Browns couldn't quite finish the deal in week 1 before the Ravens did last Sunday. There's certainly concern about this defense that has allowed a league worst 6 yards per carry and hasn't stopped the team yet from getting into the end zone when they've gotten into the red area. However, they are still second in yards per play, despite Mahomes only being 18th among starting quarterbacks in intended air yards per attempt, meaning defenses are playing off on them with a lot of deep zone coverages and testing the patience. They'll have to throw the ball underneath and run it to force opponents to come up on them more, but they have the playmakers to turn those into big yardage. This will be the game that makes my main screen as I watch these games on Sunday, and it should be a pretty fun one, but it would be really weird next to the Chiefs logo, especially playing at home. I don't see either team creating a ton of stops against these top 2 quarterbacks, although between the Chargers' bad red zone efficiency and the Chiefs' defense not having stopped the team from getting 7 points when they got there, something has to give. It will be big for Kansas City to stay patient against all those too high safety looks from the Chargers once again, and take advantage of a defense that struggles to stop the run. The running back on the other side in Austin Eckler should be heavily involved as well, on the ground and through the air. It'll be fun to see how the Chargers match up against Travis Kelce if they deploy Derwin James against him rotating down, but the key matchup might be once again the backup right tackle against Chris Jones. That's certainly one the Chiefs will have the advantage on, and I think they'll ultimately get back on track here. Give me the Chiefs 31-27. They won't stay in the loser column much longer. I'm actually not sure if Mahomes has lost back-to-back games, but either way, I don't think the spread or the total offers much value here. Moving on to another matchup of 1-1 teams in the AFC North between the Bengals and the Steelers. And they've had some cool battles in the past, although the big brother always seems to finish on top. And the Steelers once again are favored by 3.5 here, total set at 43.5. For the Bengals, I actually picked their first 2 games correctly, winning a tight one at home against the Vikings and losing at Chicago, but I did not envision a 3-interception performance from Joe Burrow after an excellent comeback showing in the season opener, and him being sacked 9 times so far is not a good sign either. That trio of receivers is lethal, with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, and Joe Mixon is one of the most complete backs in the league. Defensively, I love all the beef and just bodies that they added up front, which has allowed them to reset the line of scrimmage and force quarterbacks to move off the spot. There's some concerns at cornerback, but Jesse Bates' range can come up for a lot of that as that deep middle safety. For them, I just have to see which team will show up and how consistent they can be going forward. On the Steelers side, people were shocked to see the Raiders win at Pittsburgh, and I picked the Steelers as well, but my god, that offense is rough to watch. For a team that just invested a first-round pick in a running back, where they had to replace 4 stars on the offensive line, to now be dead last with 114 rushing yards is not a good sign. So they can't create any vertical movement in the run game. Matt Canada's new creative offense is basically the same crappy plan of attack, just with more pre-snap motion where they turn 2x2s into 3x1s and the other way around, but all really static. Big Ben has no pop in his arm and is super heavy-footed trying to move. They can't really win games like that going forward. The defensive front is still awesome and can dominate games, but if teams can block it up, those corners are a little vulnerable as well, especially when they're out there for 34 minutes a game. Pittsburgh has to rely on the defense and special teams, but it leaves them very little room for error to succeed here. I don't see either team being able to run the ball with any consistency in this matchup, and both will be smart to get the ball out quickly in the pass game, which seems to be in both offenses' DNA anyway. In terms of quarterback movement to avoid pressure, the Bengals have the upper hand with Burrow, and they offer more vertically outside of jump balls down the sideline from Big Ben. Both teams have real playmakers at the safety position who can rob routes or close in on the ball over the top if it hangs up there. What I just can't get over is the fact that when the Steelers just rush the 4 down guys on passing downs, they have the advantage at least 3 spots, and the Bengals have allowed already 9 sacks to 2 lesser defenses in Pittsburgh, who might follow a similar game plan than in Week 1 against Buffalo, when they showed Blitzbury snap a lot of times, and as the quarterback had to adjust to those extra defenders dropping out, the rush already was closing in. I could see this go down to the wire, but given the Steelers here 20-16, so I certainly like the under at 43.5. That would be something that I'd look at. And we'll continue that trend of one-on-one teams with another one from the AFC North, hosting the Chicago Bears, being the Cleveland Browns. They are favored by 7 points here, over-under set at 46.5. Looking at the Bears, I'd say them being top 5 in time of possession is more indicative of the defense being vulnerable to some big plays. But Roquan Smith did have that incredible pick 6 to hand the ball right back to the Bengals last week, and David Montgomery has looked outstanding as a ball carrier. What they've been missing offensively are big-time throws down the football fields and just a playmaking ability from the quarterback position, which they should now get from the rookie Justin Fields when he takes over on the center due to the Dalton injury. Right now, they just have one pass play of 20 plus yards, fewest in the NFL, and their 3.9 net yards gained per pass attempt is the lowest mark in the league as well. Actually slightly less than when he ran the ball even. I stated last week that it's kind of sad that they wasted an excellent roster with not having the quarterback play to take advantage of it, because this defense is certainly aging at some spots, while the young corners are still growing. For the Browns, to me this is arguably still the most talented roster in the AFC, and they could easily be 2-0 right now if they didn't crap down the leg at Kansas City in week 1 and allowed them to do their magic. Still, their offensive line looks as good as advertised. Baker has thrown a couple of bad picks, but he's also made some big-time power throws into some tight windows, and they should still get better with OBJ back as a primary deep threat, and as the young back 7 defensively for them takes on shape. Cleveland is only behind the Seahawks and Chiefs with 7.2 yards per play offensively, despite running the ball at the 4th highest rates in the league. My big worry for the defense is that they allow a league high 63% of the third downs to be converted against them, because they need somebody outside of Myles Garrett to really step up for them. And as I mentioned, this is still a completely reworked group of linebackers and secondary, with Denzel Ward as the only starter coming back from last year. I'm very excited to see Justin Fields make his first start. With a week of preparation and a game plan customized to his skill set, he should work well in the spread, RPO-oriented offense that they want to run, but he brings more of a threat to pull the ball or take off himself, and you can draw up some deeper developing plays of play action to test the secondary. With that being said, if OBJ is healthy, I don't see who can stick with him streaking down the field once they get that run game going and the safeties and quarters have to come upfield, creating those one-on-ones on the outside. And an even bigger mismatch should be Myles Garrett against that makeshift offensive tackle duo for Chicago. I think Fields shows some sparks, but not enough to beat one of the premier AFC teams, giving the Browns 31-20. As I feel for Dalton being injured now, I wanted to see Justin Fields, and he's still my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Finishing up our AFC North teams, and traveling actually to an NFC North team, in the Baltimore Ravens at 1-1, going to the Lions at 0-2. Ravens are favored by 8 points, over-under set at 49.5. Baltimore has had a very interesting start to the season. Obviously they had the top 3 running backs, a Pro Bowl corner and starting level linebacker ruled out for the year before it even started. Then they kind of fumbled away that game at Las Vegas, and when everybody starts to write them off, they pull off that incredible comeback against the Chiefs at home. Once again, they are at the top of the league, with running the ball in 55.5% of the plays, and an average of 5.9 yards per carry, while being tied for second with 51 first downs picked up. Defensively, however, they have surrendered a league-high 12 plays of 20 plus yards, being way too aggressive with all those zero blitzes of Wink Martindale, despite being without 2 of the top 3 corners. However, while some of those young guys may have received baptism by fire, they are growing in front of our very eyes, and I think they're going to continue to be aggressive, unless it's certain matchups like facing Patrick Mahomes, who's just carving up the blitz whenever he sees it. Also, fucking back of Lamar Jackson. It may not be a typical drop-back quarterback, but he just keeps making plays as a passer and running, moving the chains for his team, and his competitiveness is off the charts, which we see rub off on the rest of the team. For the Lions, they've had almost reverse games so far, as they were down big against the 49ers in week 1, and somehow found themselves with a chance to send it to overtime, down by 8, thanks to an almost collapse by San Francisco. And then they actually were up 17-14 heading into halftime on Monday night against the Packers, but then didn't do anything in the second half and lost 35-17. They have shown some fight and that kneecap biting mentality that Dan Campbell has praised, but the talent on the roster is clearly missing on some spots, and 2 good offensive play callers have now been able to attack their rules defensively. Their 8 yards allowed per play is clearly the worst mark league-wide, and with 76 total points surrendered, they're the only ones challenging the Falcons for the worst scoring defense so far. Offensively, the running backs and tight end have been the stars of the show, while some of the young receivers have stepped up. But with Jared Goff on the center, they'll have to put together some long drives to make it difficult for themselves, and I haven't been too impressed with the play designs either. So all in all, playing in Detroit rather than the Ravens crowd behind them obviously helps, and I don't think Greg Roman offers enough creativity in the pass game to stress the Lions' principles on defense like we've seen before in these past two games. But at the same time, I don't believe Jared Goff has the weapons at his disposal at the receiver position to expose some of those young members in the secondary of Baltimore, since at heart, they want to bring the house and challenge guys to get open versus man coverage. Even though, like I mentioned, we saw Martindale back off that last week and be self-aware enough to make Mahomes complete passes underneath with more zone coverages. Goff can be oblivious to where the free rush is coming from, so we could see a couple of turnovers where he gets stripped or hit just as he's trying to release the ball. Maybe the Lions find a way to mask the difference in talent again with the final score, but I personally have the Ravens winning 30-17. The Lions team total under might be worth a look here. We'll have to see how that goes throughout the week, but right now it should be around 20-21 points. And even though the Ravens defense hasn't been great, I see them bouncing back here and not allow more than 3 touchdowns to the Lions. Moving on, oh baby, these may not be juggernaut teams necessarily this year, but this coaching matchup between Sean Payton and Bill Belichick is as good as it gets, as we have the New Orleans Saints traveling to New England to take on the Patriots, who are favored by 3 points, over-under set at 41.5. So what Vegas is telling us is that this would be a pick'em on a neutral field. The first 2 games for New Orleans have been complete opposites to where they were dictating the game against the Packers in week 1, dominating the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and Jameis Winston tossing 5 touchdowns before laying an egg Carolina last week, when the offense basically only got into scoring range when the defense set them up in the red zone already off an interception, and we saw the old Jameis Winston show up again with 2 boneheaded picks. So we'll still have to see what to really make of this offense, which does have an elite dual-threat running back in Alvin Kamara, who's being heavily featured by Peyton, and one of the better offensive lines in football. But if Jameis' big arm will open up the field more, or if it leads to some balls being up there for grabs, is still not clear. Their defense has been excellent against the run, allowing a first down on just 6 of 27 attempts so far, averaging 2.8 yards per, and some of the communication on passing downs has been excellent as well. But they've surrendered a league-high 9 first downs via penalty already, which has been an issue for them in the past as well. For the Patriots, to describe their offense, I think the fact that they are tied for 3rd in percentage of drives ending in a score at 52.6%, but only converting 28.6% of their red zone possessions into touchdowns is pretty telling. They can move the ball between the 20s with a bruising rushing attack, spearheaded by Damian Harris, who made up for the game-losing fumble in week 1 by running through the entire Jets defense this past Sunday. And Mac Jones is an excellent decision maker who will find leverage advantages and recognize pressure pre-snap to keep moving the chains, as they've converted exactly half of the 3rd down so far. They could use some more big plays to not allow defenses to sneak up and keep those safeties deeper, but it hasn't been a major issue yet. Defensively, they just showed once again that the Belichick unit will make life hell for a rookie quarterback by picking off Zach Wilson 4 times on Sunday, and they can create some issues with the big linebackers overwhelming backs in protection, while being taught very well with route patterns and how to anticipate off those blitzes in the secondary. This should be a really fun chess game to watch, with Peyton trying to find ways to take advantage of all the man coverage that the Patriots want to run, with rubs and stuff like that, while Belichick will probably throw in some change-ups with late safety rotations and dropping guys out after showing pressure. The big key will be Jameis' willingness to manage the game and not trying to force the issue. Mac Jones already seems content with doing so, and that side of the ball will also be interesting. Consider its strength versus strength, with the way New Orleans has stopped the run, going up against a big offensive line for the New England Patriots. But ultimately, I believe once again the Saints just lack some of the firepower at receiver to really challenge J.C. Jackson and company when it's not schemed open. This could come down to the final seconds, and I'm going with the Patriots winning at home on a walk-off field goal, 22-20. Next up, with the first matchup between a 2-0 and an 0-2 team, when the Arizona Cardinals travel to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. Cardinals favored by 7.5, total set at 52 points. For the Jags, in the first season under new leadership of Urban Meyer and the coaching staff that he's built up, it hasn't really gone as planned, never coming close to even beating the Texans in week 1, and then getting outscored 23-6 after the opening drive versus the Broncos last Sunday. Neither side of the ball has really stood out, with way too much pressure on the plate for first overall pick Trevor Lawrence, as they have thrown the ball on a league-high 73% of plays, and Lawrence has been picked off 5 times already, which was maybe the only concern I had for him outside of his rather skinny frame, the ability to decipher more complex coverages and handle multiple reads. That's going to be a learning process for him, and game script has obviously played a large role in the play calling tendencies, but James Robinson is averaging 4.5 yards per carry, yet has only handled the ball 16 times so far. The defense, on the other hand, hasn't made things easier, allowing 30 points on average through 2 games, despite facing what were perceived as not overly explosive offenses of the Texans and Broncos, but making them look like high-powered units in those matchups. For the Cardinals, the NFC West has 3 2-0 teams, and if not for Seattle giving up a 2-touchdown lead in the 4th quarter, they could easily not have a single loss in the resume as a division. The team that might have been the most impressive so far is Arizona. Only the Bucs have scored more than the 72 points through 2 weeks, and Kyler Murray looks like the frontrunner for MVP right now, since he has been absolutely unstoppable, even if the defenses that he's faced have had some issues. The way that he can spin out of chaos and launch the ball down the field, or heave it 50 yards through the air whilst pedaling backwards, is just unreal. Rookie wide receiver Rondale Moore gives them an explosive element that they needed for a jet sweep and bubble screen game, but also working down the field. The side of the ball that has shown more improvement, however, is the defense, with Chandler Jones re-emerging as a menace off the edge, J.J. Watt creating tackles for loss, and those 2 hyper-athletic linebackers on the inside running around, with Budda Baker being somebody you just never know where he's going to line up. They had some issues slowing down Dalvin Cook last weekend, and I think if the rush can't quite get home, the inexperience in the secondary will show up, but they're opportunistic enough to support the offense and allow points on just 30% of possessions for them defensively. I think Trevor Lawrence has the ability to stress this young Arizona secondary with some vertical shots, and his offensive line has held up pretty well, allowing just 2 sacks so far, but Vance Joseph's defense is the most complex the rookie has seen so far, meaning a couple more picks could be in store for Lawrence. And then on the other side of the ball, the Jags just haven't shown me anything defensively that would make me believe that they can slow down Kyler at all. They're at 6 or 7 league-wide across yards per attempt, yards after the catch, and passer rating allowed. They're one of only 2 teams that has yet to force a turnover, and in Arizona, they face by far the most explosive offense yet, giving the Cardinals 34-20, and that's them stepping off the gas at some point. So once again, team total for Arizona is something that I'd be looking at if it's in the 28 to 30 range, somewhere in between there. Let's just see what number you can get. Moving on, however, to the Washington football team at the Buffalo Bills, 2-1-1 team, and this could be one of the sneaky great games this week that people kind of overlook. The Bills are favored by 8.5 at home, and the over-under is set at 45.5. I had Washington winning 11 games in my full season predictions, and still think that they could potentially, but if you had told me that they're middle of the pack in scoring defense, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was put on IR after just 1 week, I would have immediately torn up those predictions. The defense, if you go through the individual pieces, should be dominant, but despite pressuring the quarterback on a league-high 25.3% of dropbacks, opponents have scored on 55% of the drives against them, because they just haven't been able to get off the field. I saw that by far they have sent the most blitzes in the league, despite having that dominant front four you would think, and they are allowing 58% of the third downs to be converted against them, while also being tied for the lead league with 7 first downs surrendered via penalty. Taylor Heineke looked pretty good on Thursday night, and now has 10 days to prepare for his second start, and just heavily featuring Terry McLaurin in all 3 levels, while the offensive line has only allowed 2 sacks so far, so there's plenty of optimism still. On the Bills side, there was some concern about Josh Allen at offense after being held to just 16 points at Pittsburgh, but I give a lot of credit to the defensive game plan that fooled Allen into believing that they would bring all those blitzes that we're accustomed to seeing from them, but then dropping out and flooding those passing windows that they like to attack. Buffalo looked a lot better this past Sunday when they put 35 points on the board with some help from turnovers, but still against a very good Miami defense. I'm not sure what's going on with ball security in Upper New York, as the 6 total fumbles on the season are the most in the league, but the defense has been highly encouraging, holding opposing offenses to a league-low 16 combined points so far, and really getting after the passer, plus the average almost 36 yards per kick return with Isaiah McKenzie, as somebody that has me holding my breath whenever he fields the ball. This is a game that I believe won't be on enough television screens on Sunday, because there's a couple of awesome 1 p.m. games that feature bigger names on the national landscape, but I don't think Washington is getting enough love here as an 8.5 or even 9-point underdog. These to me are still the two favorites to win the NFC and AFC East respectively, and while I don't expect Taylor Heineke to go blow for blow with Josh Allen, we have yet to see him in MVP form, which will be interesting against what many thought could be the best young defense in the league. Buffalo's group has actually been one of the better units out there, and while the lack of dynamic offenses that they have faced certainly is a factor in that, they are miles ahead compared to where they were last year at this point. I still like the Bills at home, but I think this will be a competitive game going into the fourth quarter. Believe it or not, they're actually deep on the defensive line, which could be the difference here for the Bills, who I have winning 27-20. Not a ton of value necessarily, but I think this line is a little disrespectful to what Washington presents. And that brings us to a midday slate, starting off with the 0-2 Jets, traveling to Denver to take on the 2-0 Broncos. Anyone remember the Thursday night matchup between these two teams last year, which basically started with like a 50-yard touchdown run from Sam Darnold, and ended with an equally long one on the Broncos side from Melvin Gordon? Well, both teams now have different quarterbacks in the center. Obviously for the Broncos, because I think they started Brett Ripien in that game. And they come in with opposite records, seemingly at different stages of their life cycle. Broncos favored by 10 points, over-under set at 41.5. For the Jets, Zach Wilson tossed in 4 picks last Sunday against Bill Belichick's Patriots defense. Which, what did you really expect in this first contest against somebody who's famous for confusing rookie quarterbacks? There are some bad mistakes that he's made, but he's also flashed some great throws. Him being sacked a league high 10 times is more concerning to me, being without their excellent second-year left tackle Mekhi Becton, and a negative game streak constantly, where the number 2 overall pick is looking to get back into games with one big-time throw, and that ultimately only makes things worse for him. The Jets had some success running the ball on New England last week, but I think that was more due to the game plan, I believe. The defense has at least been average from a statistical standpoint, and they've not given up many big plays, but they haven't really made any themselves either, with just one takeaway in the season so far. With them being down early in both matchups and playing from behind, the numbers may look better because opponents haven't really had to force the issue, because I'm still worried about what will happen if teams actually attack their corners, which is one of the weakest groups league-wide. On the Denver side, we knew the Broncos defense would be good, with those 2 studs coming off either edge, and the reassembled secondary that added a Pro Bowler and a top 10 pick at cornerback, and moved another one into his more natural position at the nickel. They forced 3 turnovers, and they've been outstanding at bringing guys to the ground, allowing a league-low 80 yards after the catch through 2 games, while offenses have scored on just 3 of 18 drives against them. What has been more surprising is what they've shown offensively, where they're clearly committed to running the ball with their 2-headed backfield of Melvin Gordon and the rookie Javonte Williams, who has been a tackle-breaking machine, but they actually have been kind of middle of the pack with their efficiency. It's in the pass game that they've really made strides. Teddy Bridgewater has taken care of the ball as he always does, with 0 turnovers on his end, but he's also been a little more aggressive pushing the ball down the field, as he's in the top 10 with 8.5 yards per attempt. Overall, they are tied for third in percentage of drives, ending in scores at 52.6%, and easily tops with an average of 37 minutes of time of possession through 2 weeks. So while Denver will be without their rising sophomore receiver Jerry Jeudy, they still have plenty of weapons to test that lackluster Jets group of corners, since that will have to happen first in order to really get the ground game going, since Gang Green does have some big bodies up front defensively. Zach Wilson is one of the most talented young signal callers in the league, but I don't really see him breaking through against the Vic Fangio defense, in a game where the pass rush unit seems bound to make a larger impact on the stat sheet. Pat Surtain and Kyle Fuller could both easily jump one of those out routes we've seen so much from the Jets, and if Zach gets greedy, Justin Simmons has the range to get over and punch him for it. So while I believe this will be a fairly competitive game, and we could finally see the connection between Zach and fellow rookie Elijah Moore heat up, I can't go against the Broncos at Mile High. Give me Denver, 26-17. Nothing that really stands out to me from a betting perspective. And with that, let's move on to the 1-1 Miami Dolphins, traveling to Las Vegas to take on the 2-0 Raiders. Raiders are projected to win by 4 points, total set at 45. For Miami, their offense has put up the league worst numbers with 17 points, a minuscule 3.9 yards per play, and just 14.3% of the drives ending in points. Tua has been listed as day-to-day with a rib bruise, and while we don't know how much better the offense would have looked like against the Bills on Sunday, the second-year quarterback certainly looked much more comfortable running the show in the season opener compared to his rookie year. They have weapons to stress defenses horizontally and vertically when everybody's healthy, and I expect him to gradually improve, especially now with Will Fuller coming back. The defense hasn't lived up to expectations yet. Patriots rookie quarterback Mac Jones was able to pick them apart to some degree with those heavy blitzes and slowly march the ball down the field. And even though it was turnovers by the offense that put them in a lot of those bad spots, you saw a breakaway run from Devin Singletary early, and then some big plays from Josh Allen last week. The fact that they blitz at the third highest rate in the league, but are only average in pressures created, is a little concerning to me right now. The Raiders, on the other hand, are 115 yards ahead of the rest of the league in passing total, and also first in total yardage. There's some issues with the lack of a run game and averaging a league low 2.9 yards per carry, but Derek Carr has played at a very high level against those two very different defenses, showing the ability to take what is there, but also throw the ball down the field, as they are tied with Tampa Bay for the lead league with 12 passes of 20 plus yards. Their two second-year receivers, Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards, are coming into their own, and they have one of the premier mismatch weapons in the game with Darren Waller, while Josh Jacobs coming back should boost the run game. I still don't love the defense, even after holding Pittsburgh to just 16 points on Sunday, because for me, it's more about how little I trust the Steelers offensively, but Max Crosby has been playing with his hair on fire, and defensive coordinator Gus Bradley doesn't put his secondary in as many unfavorable positions anymore. This to me really comes down to if Tua is playing. I like Jacoby Brissett, but he can't make up for all those first team reps in 1 week, and keep up with Derek Carr. Miami will need this defense to play big, but I think the Raiders are a worse rushing team this year compared to 2020, when the Patriots with a game plan built around bringing extra pressure and challenging receivers on the outside to get open was very successful in that second half against the Silver and Black. We saw Carr carve up the Ravens defense once he figured out some of those blitz packages, but the Dolphins have all the pieces in the secondary, and there won't be as many miscommunication errors that we saw in week 1 by the Ravens. The numbers for that Vegas defense are a little misleading thanks to that week 2 matchup against the Steelers. Baltimore drove down the field against them for the most part, but the 2 individual miscues lead to fumbles lost. If Miami can win the turnover battle, I like the chances here. So maybe in a bit of an upset here, I have the Dolphins winning 23-20, with the disclaimer that Tua is playing, so maybe a sprinkle on the money line is worth a shot here. And now the two 425 games. First with the Seattle Seahawks at the Minnesota Vikings. Seahawks coming in at 1-1 against the 0-2 Vikings, coming off a heartbreaking loss where the kicker missed the chip shot 37-yard field goal. This has been one of the better matchups over the last several years. No matter how each team is doing, when they get together, it always seems to be an entertaining game. Seahawks here favored on the road by 1.5 points, total set at 55.5. For the Seahawks, their offense is averaging a league best 7.4 yards per play, despite being 12th in run play percentage, but still somehow they are dead last with just under 23 minutes of time of possession so far, which is indicative of all the big plays that they've had through the air, particularly Russ's moonballs to Tyler Lockett. The defense, on the other hand, has had back-to-back weeks where they've been effective rushing the passer, as they are just outside the top 5 in sacks and total pressures, even though the Colts and Titans have struggled in protection in the other 2 matchups respectively as well. That's a good sign for a unit that was led by safety Jamal Adams in both those categories last year. Bobby Wagner has played at an extremely high level, and if not for Derrick Henry turning on Superman mode in the 4th quarter on Sunday, the Hawks could easily be 2-0, with the defense holding down their end of the deal as well, after they really struggled early on last year. With that being said, they are last in the division right now, and they need this game. For the Vikings, long gone are the days of defense breathing fear into their position on a weekly basis, giving up multiple home run plays 2 weeks in a row against Joe Burrow and Kyler Murray. Only the Panthers actually allow a low percentage of opponent third down attempts to be converted, but they've been one of the worst first down defenses, consistently allowing offenses to stay ahead of schedule and move the chains and not even get to the money down. The Minnesota offense does feature superstar talent like Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen, but they scored only 7 points through nearly 3 full quarters at Cincinnati, and even after a pick 6 by their defense just after halftime put them ahead by a touchdown on Sunday at Arizona, they only scored 3 points themselves the rest of the way, even though, as I already mentioned, they should have won on that 37-yard chip shot field goal. Their offensive line has been getting driven backwards into the lap of Kirk Cousins on passing situations, and their defense has been too vulnerable to always stick with the run game. So as interesting as a Vikings win would make this in the long run, I just believe the Seahawks are the better team right now. I don't see how Minnesota can stop Russ from connecting on some of those balls over the top, where we haven't really even seen DK Metcalf break out, and if they want to put 2 safeties deep all game to not have guys streaking open downfield, Seattle will be content with handing the ball to Chris Carson 20 plus times. Dalvin Cook should get loose on the other end a few times as well, and if they can create those one-on-ones off play action that way, we could see both offenses put together some nice drives. But right now I think both the Seahawks offense and the defense are playing at a high level. So 31-77 for the Hawks. Maybe do it last week, finding an alternative total for the Seahawks over 27 or 27.5, something like that. You can still get good value at like minus 130. I still think that is definitely worth a bet. And that brings us to the biggest matchup of the week. The 2-0 Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the 2-0 LA Rams. Oh baby, what a matchup this is. When these two teams squared off against each other last year, it was a back and forth game that came down to the wire and ended with Jordan Fuller picking off Brady on the final drive of the night. Right now the Bucs are favored by a point, and the total is set pretty high at 55.5 as well. For the Rams, their offense may not have hit their final gear yet, but they've been already so much more explosive, with Matt Stafford as the new triggerman. I did a short video breakdown of his first touchdown for LA on my social media channels if you're interested. That connection with Cooper Kupp is palpable, and with that over-the-top element, that makes everything else easier. They are still figuring out how to exactly design their run game, but they've scored on a league-high 58% of their drives. Defensively, they have really only given up 14 and 17 points respectively, if you don't count that muffed snap off the upman on the punt team that was recovered for a touchdown by the Colts. The numbers may not be dominant at this point, but they have arguably the best player regardless of position, Aaron Donald, wreaking havoc. Their young linebackers have taken another year of experience, and the two guys that they had to replace in the secondary, David Long at nickel and the larger role for safety Taylor Rapp, have played pretty well. They've also surrendered just one first down via penalty so far, so that is big. For the Bucs, they have scored a league-high 79 points through 2 weeks, with Brady having thrown 9 combined touchdowns, and even though they've been up on multiple scores for large stretches of play, they throw the ball nearly 72% of plays. They just sneaked out a W on the season opener versus Dallas, and the Falcons somehow made it a 3-point game at some point in the second half against them this past Sunday, before they pulled away with a couple of pick sixes. But just consider that they are tied for the lead league with 5 turnovers committed, and other than the Chargers, no other team in the league is even close to the penalty yardage that they've been responsible for, which I don't think will remain a trend. Defensively, those guys up front need to live up to their potential, and they need to get off the field on third down, allowing 47% of those to be converted against them. But with this team, it seems almost like it did for the Chiefs for the last few years. You feel like they have this on and off button that they can click when they really need to. This was the toughest game to pick of the entire slate. Both these quarterbacks are playing at an extremely high level right now, and these are opportunistic defenses which could create turnovers for either squad. Obviously, the Mike Evans versus Jalen Ramsey matchup will be a fun one to watch, but as you flip things around, the Rams certainly have the advantage with one of their receivers in Cooper Kupp, who will be tough to stop in the slot, where the Bucs are still missing Sean Murphy-Bunting. I don't expect either team to be able to go 12 personnel and really run the ball consistently against each other. So spreading the field more and getting the ball out quickly, to not allow the rush to get home, should be a big part of the game plan for both sides. And while I think Tampa Bay offers more firepower in that regard, I think Sean McVay creating issues in coverage with route combinations, and the Rams defense not getting as greedy as the Bucs, who like to leave their guys in man coverage on third downs, has me favoring the home tier by the slimmest of margins. Give me the Rams on a last-second field goal, winning 29-27. So you're really kind of right on the number here. It was really tough for me to pick, so I'm probably not going to bet on this game. But with that, let's move on to Sunday Night Football, with the Green Bay Packers at 1-1 traveling to San Francisco to take on the 49ers, sitting at 2-0. This was not pretty for Green Bay 2 years ago, when the Niners had everybody healthy and beat down Rodgers and company, when they had to come to Levi Stadium twice. Last year, San Francisco was licking their wounds and could not keep up with that offense that was leading the league in several categories. Right now, the Niners are favored by 3.5 points, total set at 49.5. With the Packers, you can't even compare what we saw from them weeks 1 versus 2. Aaron Rodgers was obviously playing at a completely different level and carved up a bad Detroit secondary on Monday night, but I was more impressed with the physicality and play calling, as was pointed out on multiple occasions when I watched the Peyton and Eli Manning broadcast of the game. That's what has been the difference ever since Matt LaFleur has come to Wisconsin, the balance that they have shown offensively, and all the different things that they can run off their staples, with Aaron Jones having a monster performance just now, but Devontae Adams and Robert Tonyan capable of having big performances in any given week. The defense was getting driven backwards on several occasions by the Saints in the first game of the year, and we just saw Jared Goff and company have a lot of success against them in the first half with some balanced drives. The Packers right now are 5th worst in third down percentage and percentage of drives ending in points against them, while they're tied for the lead league with 7 first downs surrendered via penalty. So there's a lot of things that they still have to iron out on that side of the ball. For the 49ers, on the other hand, they've had two pretty different weeks as well, scoring 41 points at Detroit and dominating the game before almost having an epic collapse and giving the Lions a chance to tie the score at the end, before going to Philadelphia and not really doing anything offensively until a goal line stop when they were eyeing already a potential 10-0 deficit, which spurred on an impressive 97-yard touchdown drive, and then they put together another one in the second half that covered almost the entire field, while the defense continued to make stops for them. Kyle Shanahan has shown that they can run the ball pretty effectively no matter who carries it, which has been tested with already 4 running backs being down for them, and they're the only team to allow just 1 sack on the season. But Jimmy Garoppolo has looked so uninspiring for stretches, and I still hope we get to see an extended time from rookie Trey Lance soon. The defense, as I mentioned, has made some big plays, and with Nick Bosa back, they have a true alpha pass rusher off the edge, while Fred Warner in the middle allows them to run all those banjo coverages, where they can legitimately have him carry number 3 receivers down the seams. But with Jason Verrett being out for the year again, these young corners for San Fran will continue to be tested. Kyle Shanahan and his disciple Matt LaFleur will once again try to outdo the other with attack and defensive rules and putting guys in conflict with play design. The issue is that one is still the original young genius and slightly better at doing so still, and he gets to do it against the middle of the road defense, while LaFleur's offense is going up against some real studs. Aaron Rodgers could be the great equalizer in all of this, and if they can put some of those corners in one-on-ones with Davante Adams, it will be a real challenge for San Francisco. However, I still haven't seen enough from the Packers linebackers to be able to handle all those things that Shanahan throws their way with run schemes or covering George Kittle in the pass game. And if they play from ahead, Bosa against a guy who's better inside and then Billy Turner on the right side, that'll be an issue. I personally got the Niners winning 26-23, but it should be a highly entertaining game, kind of right on the numbers here with the spread and the total. So let's just get to a final game here, Monday Night Football. The Philadelphia Eagles at 1-1, traveling to Dallas to take on the 1-1 Cowboys. So this is the second matchup inside the NFC East, after we had the Giants in Washington last week on Thursday night. And it could be an important one if all these 4 teams want to be players in this division, which has all the other matchups blocked up over the final 4 weeks of the season. Right now the Cowboys are favored by 3.5 points, over under set at 51.5. Philadelphia absolutely demolished the Falcons in week 1, and then kind of controlled the game against San Francisco this past Sunday until that goal line stop and all the other stuff happened that I just mentioned. The one thing we can say definitely about this team is that they are built strong up front on both sides of the ball, and as long as they have that, they'll be competitive. Unfortunately, they've already lost one of their key players on the defensive line, Brandon Graham, for the year it seems like. Offensively, I like what they have assembled for this type of spread, RPO, quick screen, read option type of offense, with guys that can make things happen after the catch, but also streaking down the sideline to keep defenses honest. Jalen Hurts has executed what they needed from him in this offense with some nice deep balls, and he's averaging 11.6 yards per scramble. Defensively, their depth up front to keep bodies fresh and reset the line of scrimmage is big for them. They held the Falcons to just 6 points, and through about 25 minutes, the Niners hadn't really done anything against them either. They rallied to the ball with only 7 missed tackles so far, and they played the sticks well, holding their opponents to just 32% on third downs. The Cowboys on the flip side found themselves in a shootout in the season opener at Tampa Bay, where they could have easily pulled off the upset against the reigning Super Bowl champs, if not for a questionable pass interference call against them. Dak Prescott may not be totally back in terms of extending plays and being a threat on scrambles himself, but he is slinging the ball around, and CeeDee Lamb is turning into a star in front of our very eyes, while Amari Cooper continues to get open as well. And let me break it to you, Zeke is not the best running back on his team anymore. Tony Pollard offers an explosiveness and dynamic skill set that needs to be featured more in this offense, and if offensive coordinator Kellen Moore does that, this will be a nightmare of an offense to match up with. The defense has already lost their bookends for an extended period of time, but Micah Parsons looked incredible back at defensive end, where he originally started in high school. Going up against the backup right tackle certainly helps, but when those other linebackers are playing well, that's where the rookie can make his biggest impact right now. They are bottom 5 in yards per play and first down surrendered, but they lead the league with 6 takeaways, and with that kind of offense, that should be enough. Coming into the year, I was low on both of these teams, but will now probably move each up by 1 win in my record predictions. The Cowboys have allowed about 300 yards after the catch so far, the third most in the league, so their ability to tackle in space will be tested by this Eagles offensive approach. and we haven't really seen that Philadelphia secondary allow aerial attacks to take off, with just 4.8 net yards gained per dropback vice versa. What I saw from Dallas in the second half against Justin Herbert and company was encouraging, however. Trevon Diggs really heavily matched up against his former Alabama teammate Devontae Smith, and I believe he's one of the few guys who can actually challenge him in terms of speed and playing the catch point. At the same time, the Cowboys have the athleticism at linebacker to match up with Dallas Goedert for the most part, and I wouldn't be shocked if we saw the other rookie linebacker, Jabril Cox, being brought in on some passing downs for that job. So overall, I just believe the Cowboys present more challenges offensively in terms of playmakers and schematic difficulties, and in a game that asks both quarterbacks to drop back 30 plus times, I favor Dak over Jalen. So giving the Cowboys 27-23, classic NFC East battle, not really anything that stands out from a betting perspective. And that is your NFL Week 3. Everything is going to happen exactly the way I predicted it, and that's how we do things here. But no, seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share with a couple of friends to get them ready for Week 3. I've actually been pretty on fire with my prop bets, and I went 12-4 on my straight picks last week. Make sure to check out my social media channels for final predictions on game day, and let me know if you enjoy these types of weekly previews. Not sure if I'll be able to do it as detailed in the future, but if you guys enjoy it, I will definitely do a weekly video here. And either way, I'm going to be back with something next week. Make sure to tune in. So until then, see you later. Peace!